How are we all getting on this morning? So thank you for coming out. Sorry if I waste your time now with 20 minutes of weird and wonderful waffle, but sure, we'll give it a go. So I suppose I was asked to talk today about bravery. So I suppose it's a bit ironic because growing up on the hurling field from Kilkenny, I was always a bit of a coward, you know. And I kind of would have been the lad who kind of would have been standing there kind of, you know, with the curl, kind of trying to get in it, but never really wanted to get into the midst of the action, you know, that kind of way. Never really knew why. But that's a bit of a tangent anyway. But so basically I was asked to talk about bravery there this morning, and it kind of got me thinking. I was like, geez, that's a big enough topic to try and handle, isn't it? And I kind of, I suppose, didn't really know where to start. So when I don't have a clue what to do what I do best, and I start asking people. So I started asking people, goes, hey, your dad, look, I have to do this joke about bravery, what do you think? He goes, Jesus, yeah. Like, what's bravery to you? Like, you know, do you know anyone who's brave? Like, do we live in a brave society? Like, is there brave things around us? I remember a friend of family, I asked him and he goes, I'll tell you bravery. If you had to see what Martin Darmody did in the junior semi-final in 1973, he put his hand where no man should go. No man should, and that's the year we got up intermediate too. Right, and we never looked back since then, did we? And I suppose then, I kind of asked, I asked an aunt of mine, and I goes, what's bravery to you, Mary? She goes, my friend Peggy. Oh, my friend Peggy. Now, everyone I know actually talks the same, right? I think right? But, oh, my friend Peggy. Oh, sure, she is the bravest woman you'll ever meet. Sure, she was staring that sickness down 3 times. And she came out to far side every time, and always with a smile on her face. And I suppose that's really kind of a lot of the feedback I was getting back, is bravery is kind of, you know, it's sport, it's physicality, it's kind of battle and illness, you know, but I kind of wanted to dig a little deeper. So I goes, like, is that all it is? Is there something a bit more? And I suppose, firstly I was met with very kind of quizzical faces. But then people kind of started coming back, and there seemed to be kind of a common thread emerging. It was kind of stuff like, I suppose it's going against the grain, it's kind of doing the right thing, not the easy thing, standing up for what you believe in, being principled, all this kind of sort of stuff. And I was kind of like, yeah, I kind of suppose that is kind of bravery, isn't it? And then I was like, well, do we kind of have this in our communities and in our country? And then sure, you get the old Irish thing of, sure, you know yourself, like, you know, just we're not the best to stand up for ourselves, sure. Like, you know what it is, like, you know, sure, just we got done out of it for 800 years, and sure, now we're just as bad off with the Germans, you know. And you're kind of just looking and like, all right, yeah. But then kind of, we started getting to the nub of it, and I was kind of like, well, do we know anyone who's brave? And I remember one guy said to me, he goes, like this bravery is good and all, like, you know, like William Wallace, he was brave, right? William Wallace, he was brave, but there's a terrible amount of Egypts going around, like, and they think that they're brave, but they're only mouths. Them lads, they don't know what's good for them, they only love pulling trouble on themselves, right? And I suppose, I was kind of like, what do you mean? He kind of said, well, like your friend. I goes, which friend? That fella who was mounting to the guards. And what he was actually referring to was a friend of mine who was recently arrested, right? He was arrested about 12 months ago. But the reason he was arrested is, as a person who was born and bred in Dublin, but raised through the medium of the Irish language, educated through the medium of the Irish language, socialises through the medium of Irish language, pays taxes in Ireland to the Irish state, decided to speak Irish to the Irish police force in Garrison County, got arrested, right? And that was on national news at the time. They did a slot on prime time, and he got ridiculed, right? Absolutely ridiculed. What an idiot, sure, why would you do that anyway? Sure, he can speak English well enough, can't he? What's he doing, right? And for me, this really encapsulates the whole piece around bravery. Whether you agree with him or whether you don't, right? Maybe it was a stupid thing he did, maybe it was foolish, but he was principled. He went against the grain, he stood up for what he believed in, he got the back torn out of him by society. right? He got absolutely ridiculed. Let's look back to our history. We're good at doing this 100%. People say we don't have any principled politicians. I'm 100% apolitical, but we did have a politician who stood up for what he believed in about 6 or 7 years ago called Trevor Sargent. Did he get voted in? Not a hope. He said, I'm never going into government with Fianna Fáil. When he got voted in to go into government with Fianna Fáil, he said, I'm not going to do it. Noel Brown the same. Let's look back. The 7 guys who founded our country, right? You read in the papers more these days, Pádraig Pearse, new research released showing Pádraig Pearse was mad as a hatter, and as a result, we should never listen to a single thing he ever said. Right? And it's kind of like, we want to cultivate this thing, we want to live in a society where people are brave, but at the same time, if anyone actually goes against the grain, then they're, oh jeez, he's only looking to pull trouble on himself, he's pulling trouble on himself. And like, there's a disconnect, right? There's a disconnect, right? Like, my own story is kind of, I was in DCU, right? I graduated in 2012. I suppose I was kind of like, you know, like the vast majority of students, kind of, you know, striving our best to live up to the stereotype in many ways, you know, that kind of way. Like, we were drinking a good bit, and sure, like, you know, we were motivated by the next piece of female company, although I must admit it didn't come half as often as I would have hoped. I suppose, like, we weren't really career focused, and kind of, you passed the exams, but the reason you passed the exams is because, like, you were kind of worried that if you didn't, your album would absolutely kill you, you know, that kind of way. And so we kind of got through 3 years of college, and we really enjoyed it, like, you know, great time, you know, really enjoyable stuff, but don't know if it was ever really fulfilling, you know, that kind of way, like the difference. And I suppose we were kind of sitting around one day, and you know when you get kind of in this, like, you know, in the depths of a hungover conversation, it gets really deep all of a sudden, you know, that kind of way. And it went from the frivolous thing of just, can't believe you shifted her last night, and it very quickly accelerated down a path which I suppose we've never really looked back from. And that was kind of one of the guys, we started kind of looking back and being like, just remember him, he was great cracking. Where's he at now? And talking about guys who've been in college with us and maybe dropped out or maybe been a few years ahead of us and kind of were after finishing up. And it's like, geez, what's the matter with him? He's emigrated. I think he's over in Australia. I've seen that there on his Facebook. Oh, what about Tommy? Just Tommy's on the dole there now in Moat down in Westmeath. Like, Jesus, like that is a brilliant place to be. Like, you know. I've never even been there. Just to make my head. And Tommy's and we kind of got talking. And goes, geez, the lads, like, you know, they were the lads like that were great crack, and like they were sort of lads that we used to be hanging around with. And, like, does that mean that we're going to end up emigrating? We're going to end up unemployed. And I suppose, kind of reality kind of hit because we never really thought about it. Here we were kind of, you know, just getting on with it, enjoying life, not really thinking too much about the future. And all of a sudden we were kind of being faced with this this kind of inevitable eventuality of emigration and unemployment. And I don't know, like, you know, I'd love to go travelling, but I'd love to go travelling on my own terms. You know, that kind of way. And we didn't really like this kind of vision that society had set out for us, you know. That kind of, we just did finish last year, there isn't a job. So like I was out with the EU recently, they have a great word for emigration. We need to increase the mobility of the young people. Oh, good lads. And then we need to get more jobs for the young people. So that's good too, yeah. So if anyone out there knows of any jobs going, just let me know, right? But yeah, so we kind of started talking. I was like, well, why is it like that the vast majority of people don't get involved? Because in the third level system at the moment, like the vast majority of people don't get involved. You look right across the country, and you're talking about 75% of students get involved in no sort of structured extracurricular activities within the third level system, and 95% and higher in most colleges get involved in no form of kind of social action, right? So the vast majority of people are just kind of drifting through this system. The only reason I ended up in college is because everyone I knew was going to college, and my parents kind of expected me to go to college, and I never knew that I wanted to go to college, still don't. You know, that kind of way. But we kind of just ended up there, and we all ended up there together. And we kind of started talking, well, why is it that kind of, you know, like, we don't get involved? Why is it no one we know gets involved? And one of the guys, I think now Future might remember him as a bit of a prophet. He came out with a great line. He goes, sure, look, lad, at the end of the day, why would you do good? Doing good is shit crack. It's kind of like, yeah, you're right, it is, like, you know. It's like, no offence to whoever baked these lovely cakes and all, although I do see Mr. Kipling sign there, which is making me a bit suspicious that they might be homemade, right? And But it's kind of like, it's like, all right, so in Ireland, like, we almost have this thing of like, doing good is like, baking semi-burnt cakes and trying to sell them off. You don't know whether you're raising money for charity or getting people selling out of that. Or it's standing out in the rain with an old bucket for a charity and someone's like, what do you do again? And you're kind of turning it around and be like, we help oh, sure, read it yourself there, but I'll give you a sticker. And we were kind of just like, look, surely there's more to that, like doing good and our kind of collective future and the future of our country, like, surely that can mean more to us. And why is it that it's kind of a stereotypical thing? There's like these do-gooders who do good stuff, and then there's like everybody else who doesn't, and we were kind of just like, well, like, that can kind of be challenged, why don't we actually try to do something about that? And I remember floating it to a senior member of management in the college, being like, this is what we're trying to do. And it brings it back to what we were kind of saying earlier about the thing of them fellas don't know what's good for them. That person said, to be honest, like, you'd be better off not getting into that sort of stuff. Why? And they're like, sure, look, one of the key things you need to learn in life is when to know what's good for you and what's not. And I was kind of like, right, so here we are, staring down the barrel of mass immigration and mass unemployment, and we're trying to do something about it, and it's probably not going to be good for us. Alright. So we just started anyway, we were like, sure, look, we do that. And we just started, right, let's try doing good stuff. So we started just like, running events in the name of social good, like, like fundraising, things like that. Like, but as opposed to doing a fun run, we do like, an underwear fun run, or the nearly naked mile, as we call it. Or then we started doing like flash mobs, but as opposed to just coming together and doing all the YMCA thing, we bring them all together and we just put people shifting, right? Like, I don't know why it worked. Like, I don't know what means that, like, a 19-year-old boy loves running around in his jocks. But they do, right? And like all of a sudden the real energy started coming about things. And people are kind of like, geez, we're after making fundraising good crack. Could we make volunteering good crack? And we kind of went and, like, as opposed to doing this kind of voluntary tuition where you sit down and you're like, okay, what's into homework this week? We started like going out and teaching the Leaving Cert through rap music. And as opposed to doing like adopt a grandparent, we'd go down into old folks' homes and we'd be kind of teaching some of the elderly gentlemen how to do stand-up comedy, because everybody deserves the right to put a smile on someone else's face. That kind of way. And we just started doing stuff that, like, it was good crack, right, but it was good for the community too, and it was vibrant. And all of a sudden, kind of this atmosphere and this culture started to grow, where people wanted to get involved, where people see they had a role, where people wanted to start doing good stuff, where all of a sudden it wasn't a brave individual, wasn't that person who just stood up and went against the grain on his own, because everyone was doing it, and there was a culture, and collectively we were kind of making a brave decision that, to be honest, we live in a society which doesn't work, might work for some people, but it doesn't work for everybody, and that's not good enough, and we're going to do something about it, because we were fed up of living in a country where 1,000 primary school students don't go on to secondary school every year. And we were fed up living in a country where 1 in 4 adults have basic literacy difficulties. And we're fed up of living in a country where we have a political system that's ideologically bankrupt. We're destroying the environment. We've one of the richest cultures in Western Europe, and we're gleefully letting it die. Like, that's not good enough. We don't live in a country where it works. Why do we pretend that we do? It's like we're only kidding ourselves, and we're walking down a path. And like, we've been down this path before, where you kind of walk down and, oh yeah, grant, and then everything just falls apart, and everyone's wondering, oh yeah, why is it all falling apart? Oh yeah, Fianna Fáil, da 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 da. It's nothing to do with Fianna Fáil. It's nothing to do, they're all as guilty as each other, and we're as guilty as everyone else, because we're not taking collective responsibility for doing it. That's how republics work, that's how democracies work. You need to take collective responsibility. As a society, we need to make brave decisions, and we need to say, here, do you know what, we live in a country that doesn't work, we're going to do something about it, right? That's what we need to do. Is it happening at the moment? I don't know, right? If you read the paper, you'll see a lot of things, and X is going to change Y, and Y is going to change Z, and so on and so forth. And to be honest, I'm probably a little cynical about some of it. And I'll tell you why. Because very rarely have I met somebody who's actually been brave enough to say, do you know what, I want to bring about transformational change, right? And there's one reason for it, and it's 100% understandable. It's 100% understandable, right? And for someone to bring about transformational change, what they have to say is, I am going to remove myself from the status quo, right? And I'm going to say to myself, I'm going to shake this tree, I'm going to shake it hard, and to be honest, if I end up at the bottom, that's grand, because at least I'll have given it a lash and I'll know what's going to happen. Whereas what we have at the moment is all these people who say they want to change, but they want to change in a way that is in no way threatening to their position in society. Right? And that's understandable. People work to get to a level, and if I was kind of, you know, if I had 2 kids and a mortgage and a stable job, I probably wouldn't be going around saying, hey, we need to disrupt society, we need to change, we need to do this, that, or the other. Because, to be honest, I have a terrible amount to lose. Right? So when you hear a lot of people out there talking about change, like, I question myself, do they actually want change? And more often than not, when they actually are greeted with things which could fundamentally transform society, they kind of go back to the reflex of, I just know what's good for them. They kind of try to belittle the things that can actually bring about the change that they're talking about. And that doesn't mean that I don't think it can happen, and that's actually why I think that the young people are incredibly important. Because as a young person, society doesn't really have any expectations of me. Like, I should be unemployed and getting ready to get in an airplane, Qantas over to Australia, to drink for 2 years, and then I could come back and maybe sure there'll be a job there at the end of it, you know. Like, that's society's expectation of me. Now, I don't really have anything to lose. I don't have kids. I don't have a mortgage. No, mammy, I can safely say I definitely don't have any kids. No, so I don't have kids, don't have a mortgage, don't really have anything to lose. So I can go out, and like all the lads I know, we can go out, we can do stuff. Why are we doing it at the moment? Like, a lot of it is kind of this expectation piece. All we're expected to do is to go out and to just drink and to live the life and do all that sort of stuff, and no one's actually saying, here, do you know what? We've actually done something fantastic as a society. We've created the most educated generation we've ever created in this country. They're some of the most creative, some of the most talented, some of the most passionate people in their time. And they're the people who can go out and they can fundamentally disrupt the way that society works. Is it a new thing in this country? No. Paul Pierce was the editor of a national newspaper when he was 23. Michael Collins was what, 28, 29, was like the Minister for Finance. You know, like, it's not a new thing. Look across the world. Louis Braille came up with Braille at 20. Edison started inventing it at like 19. Bill Gates set up Microsoft at 20. Like, young people do phenomenal things, but for some reason, like, we're kind of saying to them, here, wait a few years, you know, wait a few years, it's not your time yet, you know. And we need to kind of change this mindset. Case in point, right? Who's the young person who's brought about the most disruptive change in society in the last 20 years? Harry Potter. Right? I tell you what Harry Potter did. And obviously we're not privy to that side of the world. You know, one day we'll come across that little laneway where we can get in, right? But what Harry Potter had, right? No, like, bear with it, right? So what Harry Potter had is, right? Harry Potter had a burning desire. He grew up in a society that didn't work for him. Right? Like a lot of young people today, right? He grew up in a society that didn't work for him, right? He had a vision, he knew that things could be done in a different way. He knew there was a better way of doing things. He related that to his peers, they bought in. They knew, as a collective, right? As a collective, that there was a new way of doing things, right? Could they do it on their own? No, right? What happened was that you had the senior people in that given society, so there was people in the Ministry of Magic, and you had the principal of the school, and you had all these sort of people, the Weasleys, they were good folk, the Weasleys, right? You had all these people who bought into it and said, here, do you know what? You can go and do stuff, you can fundamentally disrupt society, you can create a much more equal society in which we're all happy to live in, right? But you kind of do need our help. But our help isn't the traditional way of, we're going to teach you how to do it. Our help actually consisted of, they invested of them with time, with resources. They introduced them to people because he didn't know everyone he needed to know to get the things that he needed to get done. They mentored him, they helped him figure out the problems for himself. And do you know what? He went, and with a group of his peers, they radically changed the society in which they were living in. There's a lot to be learned from that. At the moment, we have the young people with the energy, with the creativity, with the ideas. What do they need? They need to learn from those who've gone before them, from their mistakes. They need to learn, they need to be introduced to people because they don't know the people who can really help them bring about the difference. They need to be invested in, both with time, if you have skills to go and help people, but also with money, because you can't get big things done on your own, you know. And I think that's the challenge. I think that's what we need to do as a society. We need to actually be brave, and we need to say, here, do you know what? We've done a great job. We've got a generation who can actually bring about transformative change. And what we're going to do is we're going to invest in them, we're going to mentor them, we're going to introduce them to the people that they need to know. And as a collective, as an intergenerational thing, maybe one day we'll be able to look back in 30, 40 years and say, here, do you know what? We're after actually doing something really great here. We're actually after creating a phenomenal society, a phenomenal economy, a phenomenal way of living on a small island country, which currently is not sustainable in any way, shape or form. So that for me is what bravery looks like. That is, it's not actually an individual trait, which people think about it. It has to be collective, because if it's collective, then all of a sudden we can get people moving in the right direction, and maybe we'll actually make something in this country. But that's kind of all I have anyway.